Elio guys, and welcome back. And in today's old video, we're going to be talking about the selective summon for Eroica here. Now keep in mind, this is my secondary account. I do have a main account where my progress is basically stopped until global launch, but with launch happening here pretty soon, if not by the time that you watch this video, I figured I would kind of elaborate on some of the selective summon characters that you can use to help you kind of progress through PvE. I will focus purely on PvE though, because it doesn't matter how good of a PvP unit that you may choose to pick at this point in time as you begin the game, because selective summon opens up, I believe, after stage 0.3. If you can't get through PvE to get your characters geared up, then PvP makes no sense at all. So let's go over here to the hero tab real quick, and I'll quickly touch on them, and I'll also have like a photo of the selective summon which I screenshot from the game just up so you guys can see it here. Alright, so the units that we get to choose in particular for these selective summons is going to be Gaffs right here. There's also Kip, if I can find her. There's going to be Cass Carson, there's Wraith, which I believe was higher up here. There's also Malavi, which I don't have either because this is my secondary account. Don't worry, I'll explain later about that. Malavi's down here. There's Sore, where's she at? Sore is right here. There's Mintz, and I do have Orslaha as well, so we will get into her real quick here. But just to go ahead and kind of make things easier for yourself, I'm going to go ahead and drop Gaffs off this list, not because Gaffs is a bad unit at all, but as a player, literally with, like, look at this account just started here, you don't really have that many units to choose from. I don't suggest you going for a unit that is heavily single target based to get you through the campaign, because you want AoE damage to kind of help clear out waves as fast as possible for experience farming, for just getting through stages until you get to a point where you can get your character. So not saying that Gaffs is bad at all. I'm just saying, if you want to go for something in terms of clearing out the story efficiently, he's not going to be the first pick. The same thing for Kip here. I don't think Kip is a bad choice either because of her skills, where she can do basic attack damage with her normal skill. Her S1 skill hits one target, and then her secondary skill hits all targets, but it's only 100% damage. I mean, she can also steal their buffs too, but I would just go for raw damage in the very beginning here. So we've already kind of eradicated Gaffs and Kip off the list here. In terms of Cass Carson, once again, his basic attack is fine. His first skill though, Chain Elbow, does deal 100% damage, but it's only a single target. And then for his second skill, once again, it's single target. We don't want that either. That's the same issue with Gaffs. So while he is a high outputting damage unit, once again, we don't want that at all. Moving through the list though, coming up next is going to be Wraith. Honestly, for Wraith, I would say that she's probably going to be the third pick for a player out there if you're not interested in the other two, which I will touch on. While she does have her basic attack here, which does increase damage if a target is in the irrecoverable state or in the irrecoverable debuff, which she puts out here. But her main selling point here is her S1 skill, which also has the unrecoverable debuff, which can be applied to enemies to kind of boost up her basic skill while you're trying to get her other skills off cooldown. So it synergizes nicely with that. And then for her ultimate, once again, it is single target, but we can see right here it's 150%, and you do keep that debuff going on them. So overall, there's a good synergy with her, and she can hit very hard because on my main account I use her quite a bit. You have to use what you have. So she's not a unit to sleep on. While most of her damage is raw, it is high for what you get in terms of value. So she's going to be third on my list. That is Wraith, of course. Moving on to the next one though is going to be none other than baby girl herself, if I can find her, which is Malavi. So Malavi is one of the units that I chose in the past, like when Eroica was essentially in its infancy before global launch, and she hasn't done anything wrong since then. She just has a very great kit, and we're about to see why. So for her basic attack right here, if you do choose to do the burning status, you can get that up there, and basically it does add burn to her basic skill, which you can use all the time if you want. But what makes Malavi so great though is going to be her S1 skill, and this is called Dragon Breath, and it deals only 50% of her attack to all enemies, but it also grants a 75% chance to burn them for 2 turns. So you're already going to start stacking some debuffs in the very beginning, and as your turns go on longer and longer, having multiple stacks of burn just increases your damage. And we can see right here too that the text states that it deals 20% of her attack as burn damage for a turn. So the more attack on this baby girl, it doesn't matter if her AoE does initial like no damage at all. With those burns being up there, you're just winning right there. And then for her S2 skill called Dragon Ascension, she once again deals 80% of attack damage to all enemies, and you do have the option to either boost it up by 100% for a target with the most HP, or you can give her more burn. In this scenario though, obviously you can kind of reset your skills later on. Going with that more burn is just going to make her a burning queen, because all 3 of her moves have a chance to proc burn, and that is a very good debuff once you have very high attack. So Malavi, honestly, it's kind of hard to debate with her versus the other one that I'm going to recommend to you. But if you choose either Malavi or the next one that I'm going to talk about here, well, you can't go wrong at all. And then next on the list, we do have Sorey. Sorey is a great unit too, but she's in the same vein as Gaffs, where she's usable. She's definitely a very good baby girl to have, but if you don't have the units to use her at her best, there's literally no point in you pulling her at this point in time. So what makes her so appealing? Well, her basic skill does 40% of her attack to all enemies right there, and there is a chance for you to also inflict defense down on them if you want to go that route. Or if you want to also run a chance of lowering her S2 skill cooldown, you can choose that option, but defense down may very well work for you. And then in terms of her S1 skill, this move deals 100% of her attack to a target with a 50% chance to inflict defense down on them. That's great, but you will soon find out that Sorey isn't really a DPS unit. You know, she's helping other units get DPS. She isn't herself a DPS unit. Her values are just too low, and her main job is just debuffing. So don't think, oh, I'm going to pick Sorey and just breeze through things, because if you don't have a good DPS set up with Sorey, there's literally no point. For her second skill though, she deals 100% of attack damage to all enemies, and there's also a 50% extra damage tacked onto that if the enemy has a shield. These don't bring anything else to the table. So you could basically call Sorey like an AoE-ish type character, but her main goal is just debuffing the enemies that you fight for your other units like Gaffs, like Wraith, like Malavi, to come in there and tear things up. So once again, I personally just don't recommend her, because it's not that she's bad, it's just not time for her when you don't have any dedicated sources of DPS. And then moving on down the list too, we do have baby girl Mence. I'm going to go ahead and tell you right now, Mence is great, but I would probably reserve her to PvP. Just one man's opinion, because we can see with her basic skill right here, she deals 80% of her attack to a target, and she can kind of accelerate herself or decelerate the target, which is fine. But if you don't have anything packing heat within those moves, it doesn't really matter, because you just started the game. But for her S1 skill called Flashbang, it deals 80% of attack to all enemies with a 30% chance to blind them for one turn. This would be great in a PvP situation, but in PvE, I much rather either deal higher damage to the enemies that I'm fighting, or I would rather just lather them up with debuffs. So up to you, it's at your own discretion. And then for her second skill called Sonic Blitz, this one deals 90% of attack damage to all enemies, and then 70% chance to inflict herself with attack speed up for one turn. So this is a self-buffing move with a super high cooldown, and once again, it's great for raw damage. It's great if she has a high speed stat, but... And now with everything else out of the way here, there's only one unit left on the selective summon list, which is Orslaha. And there's a reason why she's the last one on the list, and also the reason why that you see her for this account right here. So let's go ahead and click on her and take a look at her skills, and why I personally chose her over Malavi, because I picked Malavi on my main account. Even though I have both, but we're not going to get into that here. So for her basic skill, this is just called Thrust. It deals 90% of her attack to a target, and it also has a 60% chance to shock the target for 2 turns. And if we also read right here, what shock does essentially is it deals 10% of her attack as shock damage for a turn. And if we see right here in the little parentheses, it says unable to act with a 10% chance. So think of shock as not only a debuff like burn, where there's dot damage going on, but there's also some crowd control in here. And while this doesn't sound reliable at first, due to the amount of shock stacks that you can put onto an enemy, this does, like, it does its due diligence, is all I can say right here. Moving on to her S1 skill though, she deals 80% of her attack to all enemies, and there's also an 80% chance to shock them for 3 turns. So 2 moves into a battle, and there's already a possibility of an enemy having 2 shock stacks on them, which isn't as high as burn, but there's also the probability of them not being able to attack either. So essentially you're just getting more and more and more free damage. And we haven't even gotten into being able to choose the effect of this move in general, which is located right here below with the on crit hit, which refreshes shock on the target for 3 turns. And then there's also the increases max stackable shock by 1. So the options right here are just super amazing, that you start off with an AoE and there's a high chance of that shock sticking before things have gotten rough for you. And then for her S2 skill, which is called Ragnarok, this one right here, she deals 150% attack damage to a target. Once again, this is single target, very reminiscent of someone called Wraith, which I mentioned before here. And then if you choose to go about this route, you can increase damage by 15% per shock stack, and then all shock effects are removed. This right here is the money. So not only can you get some innate raw damage on whatever target that you're fighting here, but depending on the amount of shock stacks that you're rocking when you decide to hit that target, there's a whole bunch of added damage in that situation if you can get all of those shocks to stick, which we've already seen is a high probability just right off the gate here. We haven't even looked at her skills or anything in terms of books and increasing your chances. Alright, to basically summarize the whole selective summoning here, in third place I'm going to go ahead and give it to Wraith here, because not only does she have an AoE move, which is great for clearing, she can also produce just very raw high damage, and it's nice that her basic attack over here also synergizes with her other skills of making sure that once that debuff is applied, she can still keep up damage even though her skills may be on a cooldown rotation. And then in second place you could choose Malavi or Slaha, but it's really up to you because Malavi is just the burn queen. If you do choose to go the Malavi route though, at least in my opinion, if you can get lucky with your first selective summoning pulls and get Xenia to go along with her, that's going to be superb, because Xenia also brings in the burn too, because right here in her basic skill she has burn right there. This is just an AoE, you know, nothing spectacular about it, unless you go ahead and do the route where it increases her damage by 15% per burn stack. So with her and Malavi, oh yeah, you're making money right there. And then for her second skill too, this one also does burn damage. So rocking those two right off the start is always a great idea. And of course, last but not least is going to be Orslaha. And if you choose to go the Orslaha route, that's perfectly fine too, because as I indicated in the past on my main account, I chose Malavi, didn't have any issues, but Orslaha for whatever reason kind of really carried my butt through the game. But there has been recent changes to where things seem to be a little bit more fair until we get to the end. But hopefully this video helped you guys, and if it did help, feel free to leave that in the comments below. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace out.